Okay, so here we are. This is the standard DJ setup that we're going to start with for today's video. Today we have a pretty simple, basic, I guess you could say run-of-the-mill DJ setup. We basically have one mixer and two decks. This is the kind of setup that you would see pretty much anywhere in terms of just configuration. Again, one mixer and two decks. If you get fancier, you can get one mixer and four decks, or maybe even more than that, but this is usually what you start off with. And in this particular situation, we have one Allen & Heath 42 mixer, or Zone 42 mixer. It's a 4-channel mixer, and we have a pair of Technics SL-1200 M3D vinyl turntables. These are the M3Ds. The very famous model is the SL-1200 MK2, which is very ubiquitous. That was the original Technics 1200 model. And then after that, there were more different ones like the MK3s, I believe, the M3Ds. Then they went up to MK5s. And so they basically all look the same. They all basically do the same thing, but I'm just pointing that out because these are very famous turntables in the DJing world. These are the guys that pretty much started it all for us, and they've been around for I think 30, 40 years. So we have a pair here in the office, and this is where we're going to start off with to show you how to start beat matching and doing other things in DJing. So again, basic setup here, one mixer and two decks. And so what we're going to do in this video is we're going to go ahead and talk about a little bit about the turntables, how they work, the different features here, a brief overview of the mixer, some of the features to kind of get you going, and then we're going to go ahead and start talking about how you actually beat match and play around with the music on the turntables. Okay. So let me just briefly talk a little bit about the mixer here. The mixer, this is a 4-channel mixer, which means that you have 4 different potential decks that you can connect to. And when I say decks, a deck refers to basically a turntable or a CDJ or any sort of device that you're going to connect to the mixer that will play a sound source or music. So we can connect up to 4 and play 4 at a time. We can actually connect up to 8 devices because each input here, each channel here has actually 2 inputs that we can connect, and we can switch between them. But at a simultaneous time, you can only play 4, but that's plenty for us because we only have 2 here. And basic signal flow, you have the deck connected to the top of the mixer. It hits the level knob, which controls how high or low the signal is coming into the mixer. There's an input switch here. In this case, it's a button. You can toggle which of the 2 inputs on each of the channels that you're going to be playing. Then the next controls here are the EQ controls. These control the high, the mid, and the low frequencies and how much of those you can hear. For this video, we're not going to touch these. We're just going to leave them at their 12 o'clock position, their neutral position. The next thing we hit is the filter, which again we're not going to talk about in this video. This is an effect, a sound effect. Then there's the dry wet knob, which again we're not going to talk about, we're not going to use, I should say, in this video because this is for an external effects unit, so just keep it to the leftmost position here. The Q buttons are actually important because these Q buttons, what they do is they toggle whether or not the channel that you're playing your music on is going to be audible through the headphones. So the headphones connect down here in the lower left corner, and there is a level knob, which is for how loud the headphones are going to play, and then there's a Q mix knob, which controls how much of the cue you can hear versus the mix. Now the mix is basically whatever is coming out of your mixer. So this is whatever music comes into the mixer, it's going to get output to the main speakers, to the crowd, and that's what they're going to hear. And the mix is basically what they're going to hear. The cue is actually what is controlled by these buttons here. So whatever is highlighted here in red or toggled on the Q buttons here is going to be audible when you turn the knob all the way to Q up here on the headphone controls. So for example, what that means is that if I am transitioning from one track to another, and I have one track playing right here, and this is the track I'm going to be working on while I'm mixing and then bring in eventually, if I want to manipulate this track without anybody hearing what's going on, then basically I have it turned down on the mixer, and I can have this playing in my headphones, just in my headphones, by pressing that track. So for example, this track is playing to the crowd, but this one is the one I'm going to work on. I can toggle it on by pressing that button, and then I can hear it in the headphones. Now if I start turning this knob towards mix, then I'm going to start introducing the track or tracks that are playing out to the crowd into my headphones. So then I can actually hear not only this track in my headphones, but also whatever's playing out to the crowd. So then I can easily hear what they sound like in relation to each other and do other things like beat matching and phrase matching and whatnot, okay? So that's that. And then here we have the up faders. These are what control what is actually playing out to the crowd. So if they're down like this, that means none of these tracks are playing to the crowd. But if they're up, like this one, for example, is up right now, then that track is going to be playing up, or playing out to the crowd, I should say. And so that's how you're going to bring a track in or out, okay? And then we're not going to talk about the crossfader today because we're not going to use this. And then the other thing I'm really going to talk about here is this mix and booth knobs here. We're not going to use booth because these are this is a control for how loud your stage speakers are, but here in the office we don't actually have stage speakers, so we don't have to, it's not connected to anything, so we don't have to worry about it. And the mix knob is actually what controls, on the other hand, actually controls our speakers here that we're going to be using for today's video. So this will be basically, let's pretend this is out to speakers that are playing out to the crowd, but for intents and purposes, for our intents and purposes, this is going to be how loud our speakers are playing here in our room here, or in the office here, okay? So I'm just going to set this at a reasonable level. And then that's pretty much it. I'm going to cover the mixer more in detail in a later video, but that's just a brief overview of how the mixer works, just so you can kind of get going with the beat matching and the turntables, okay? So now let me go ahead and move to the turntables. So the SL-1200 or the 1200 turntable that is so famous and great, and the DJ's best friend is right here, and it's a very simple device. Pretty much what happens in terms of the controls is we have this knob right here, which is actually the on and off switch. So right now, you know the turntable is on because this red light on the side here is actually glowing red. If I want to switch it off, I can just turn it to this side and it'll turn off, and then flip it back on. You can see there. This button, start, stop, what this does is this controls whether or not the platter is going to be spinning, so pretty self-explanatory. 33 and 45 RPM buttons. What these do is they control the default platter speed on the turntable, and you might be wondering, well, why do we have two different platter speeds? Well, back in the day, or even today, if you buy vinyl, some records are pressed at different rotational speeds. So, for example, this track is a 45 RPM track, which means that if I play this track at 33 RPMs, it's going to sound really slow. And if I play at 45, now it sounds normal. So basically, when you put on a record and it sounds funny, like it's too fast or too slow, then most likely what it is that you have to set this to the right setting on here. And the reason why they have this too is because records were recorded at different rotational speeds, just depending on the album, the record. If you play the record at a slower rotational speed, like 33 RPM, then you can fit more music on one side because it's going to take longer for the needle to go across the record as opposed to 45 RPM. So it's just throw on a record, see how it plays, and just set it, okay? Here we have a lamp. Just to see, for example, where the needle is. So if we're in a dark club, we can pop this guy out and then we can more easily see where the needle is on the record in relation to where it's playing. Unfortunately, our lamps are burned out, so we're not going to use them. But normally if this would work, that's what that would be. And then up here is a very important control. This slider right here is called the pitch adjustment slider, or pitch fader, or in other words, tempo adjustment fader. Now what the tempo adjustment fader does is basically it controls how fast your track's going to play. So technically speaking, what all this is doing is it's changing how fast this platter is going to be spinning, but that in turn, of course, means that it's going to change the tempo of the track, or the pitch adjustment, because and it's called pitch adjustment because as you're manipulating the tempo of the track, the pitch of the track will actually change. So that's the name, that's the reason behind the name right there. But yeah, otherwise it's called tempo. It's just adjusting the tempo, changing how fast the track's going to be playing, and it's what we're going to use to do the beat matching here. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to talk about on the turntable is this whole thing right here. This is called the control arm, and on the control arm we have this portion right here called the cartridge, or actually this is the head shell, and the cartridge is at the bottom here attached to the head shell, and then the head shell attached to the head shell, or excuse me, attached to the cartridge, I should say, is the stylus. And the stylus is another word for basically the needle on the record, or not on the record, but the needle in the turntable here. So actually, you can actually take this thing off. You can actually do that. You can take this head shell off because you can actually swap these out for different needles or different cartridges. And you can see right here on this particular one that there is a needle. This is actually called the stylus, this metal part here, and at the very tip of this metal part is the actual needle sticking out that sits in the groove of the record, and that's what actually picks up the sound from the record and transmits it to the rest of the turntable into the mixer, and creates the music for you. Okay, so right now you can actually see here that there's this little flap right here. This is a little protector here so that if you're not using the turntable, you can flip this down and you won't accidentally bend the needle. So if you're not using it, make sure to keep that down. Otherwise, we're going to bring this back up and we're just going to reattach it back to the control arm here and use it to play music. Okay, and so you can actually unattach this part here, the control arm, by flipping this little I don't know what you want to call this thing, latch. That's the word I was looking for. And so now you can freely move this. So again, the latch here is here just to make sure that if you're not using the turntable, that this isn't going to be flying around and accidentally breaking your needle and stuff like that. So we're going to unattach this like that, or unlatch it, I should say. And then there's two ways to actually play a record using the control arm. You can pick it up by the side like this, like I am right here, or you can actually use this little lever right here to basically lift up the control arm and then to gently move it over towards the record and then bring it back down and let it gently slide into place on the record to play. Okay? You actually don't see DJs really do that too much. Actually, I don't think I've ever seen a DJ do that live in a performance, because this takes a little bit of time. As you can see, it takes a little bit of time to go down and back up. So it's, in order to be fast and expedient with things, we're just going to use our hands, I should say, to hold on to the control arm and to the needle here and actually play the record that way. Okay? And then the rest of the control arm here is just a little counterweight here so that everything is balanced out, and you can adjust things to change how much weight is being put on the needle and stuff like that. But I'm not going to go over that. We're not going to really worry about that in this particular video on how to set these things up. So we're just going to assume this is all set up right. And now we're going to go ahead and just move right into beat matching and playing a record and all that cool stuff. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up this track right here because we're going to use this record. I'm going to bring this up so that we can hear it when we start playing it. And when you're playing a record, you're going to do it in a certain way. Okay. So you don't just put the needle arbitrarily anywhere on the record. You actually have to place it in a certain location. So what I'm going to do is unlatch that again. And then, actually, when you pick up the needle, you're going to place this needle right at the edge of the record in a particular location. So I'm going to lift up the record here, and hopefully you guys can see this on the video. So basically, we have the record here. There's all these little circles going all around, and these are the grooves, and these are actually what is the sound recording on the record. Now, if you see at the very edge here, there's like a glossier part where basically there isn't any recording. This is where the tip of my finger is. This is actually where we're going to place the needle down onto. And this is the silence just before the track starts. So we're going to pick up our needle and going to place it right at the edge here. And so then what happens is when the record starts playing, the needle's slowly going to move over towards the recording, and then once it hits the recording, it'll start playing the track. Okay? And let me just point this out here on the needle here again. The control, not the control arm. What am I saying here? The needle right here is at the very bottom of the head shell here. Very much at the bottom here. You can't see it from the top, but it's right here in the middle of this white part. So when you're placing the needle on the record, just make sure that this middle part of the white part is actually where the needle is and where you're going to place the needle on the record. Okay? So let me go ahead and do that. Reattach this. And I should have probably kept this down because you can hear the noise a little bit in the when I was reattaching this. So all we have to do to start playing the record is make sure that this is flipped on, and we're going to start the record by hitting the start-stop button, and then we're going to lift up the needle gently by using our fingers on the side handle here, gently lifting up, moving it over to the side, over towards the record, and then, like I said, the middle of the cartridge here, of the white part, is where we're going to shoot for placing it down on the edge of the record. So what's going to happen, hopefully, is I'm going to place it down. It's going to rotate a few times, and the track should start playing. That's all there is to it. Now, if you want to stop playing the record, all you're going to do is just going to gently lift the needle straight up like that, and then just move it over to the side, and there you go. So you're going to have to practice this probably a few times if you've never done this before, but after you do it a couple times, it kind of becomes natural and should be pretty easy to do. So always make sure you do it straight up like that, and then straight down, gently place it on the record. Don't press down on the record, just let it sit on the record, okay? Because we don't want to bend the needle or do anything funky with it, so we can protect the needle and not have to replace them very often. Okay, so now the next step in the beat matching process, or the record playing process, is what we're going to want to do. Oh, and actually let me back up a little bit here. So right now we're playing the record from the very beginning of it, but you can also move around in the record if you want to, by just basically placing the needle in different locations on the record. So for example, this is the beginning, but if I want to play just the middle of the track, I can just move it over, move it like that, and I'm playing the middle. Or if I want to play the end of the track, then I just have to do that. So basically you can seek around in the track by just placing the needle in different locations. And if you're really familiar with the track, you could actually tell where different sections of it are by just looking down on the record here and how the grooves look. Okay? Alright, so going back to the beginning, what are we going to do? So when we're beat matching, the first thing what we want to do is find the very first beat of the track. Now, electronic music is pretty easy in the regard that a lot of it, like for example, like house music, trance, and anything that's basically related to those genres, or basically anything related to house music in general, we'll usually start off with an intro part that has a beat, a kick drum playing on every single beat in the track. So when we start beat matching, the first thing we want to do is we want to find the first beat of the track. And in house music, for example, it's very easy because the first beat will be that first kick drum that you hear. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to go ahead and try to find the first beat on this particular track, and so that we can start off beat matching with that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start this back up again. We start our record. We're going to do what we just did. We're going to place down the record, or the needle I should say, on the record. And then I'm going to stop the record by just placing my hand on the record itself right when I hear that first beat, or the first kick drum in this track. Okay, so now I did miss it by a little bit, and you can hear all that kind of noise going on from the record. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to rewind this a little bit so I can get back to that first beat. And how do I know I'm back at the first beat? Well, basically there's no percussion going on in front of it, and then you hear that first thump. And that first thump is the actual first kick drum or first beat of this track. So I'm going to rewind it back. And I'm going to stop this record and hold it with my hand right at the beginning of that kick drum. Like that. So that's that first beat in this track. Okay? Alright. So I'll try doing that a couple times so you kind of get a feel for where the beat is. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to set this track up so that it plays. so that we can actually start beat matching to this track over here. So we're going to pretend that this track over here is actually playing out to the crowd already. Let me move it in a little bit closer to where it's supposed to play. Alright, so there we go. So that track's playing, and what we're going to do is we have this first beat right here, okay? And let me just point something out, actually. When you're holding the record, probably the easiest way to do this is to hold it with your fingers right at the edge here, just like I have them right here. And then don't hold it with your like very edges of your fingers like that. Hold it at this angle, the way you see my hand right here, and use the pads, the pads of your fingers to hold down on the record. Okay, that'll make it easier for you to manipulate the record and move it back and forth. Okay, otherwise, because I've seen people do like this like cat scratching kind of motion with their hand, that's never going to work. It just does not work. So try doing it the way I'm doing it, the way you see it here with my hand. Okay, it's going to make it easier. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and play this track again. We got our beat. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to play this beat that we're holding on to, that we have queued up, in sync with the other track. Just like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to time this so that we release this record on beat of the other track. Like that. Now if you listen to it, you can hear that the two beats are already off from each other. What that basically tells us right off the bat is that these two tracks are not at the same BPM right now. So our job will be to adjust this track that we're going to transition into, adjust its BPM or its tempo so that it matches the track that's currently playing out to the crowd. Okay? So that's the whole process of beat matching. That's what we're going to be doing. Okay. Now let me point something out with the what we just did here. So what we just did here is called queuing up your track, as I guess the official term here. And basically you're getting this track ready, and then you're just going to let it go and play and queue it up and be ready to play it right when you need it to. When this other track is playing already out to the crowd, and obviously what we're doing here is just through the speakers so you guys can hear it on the video, but normally this track on the right here is actually going to be playing just in your headphones. It's the other track that will be playing out to the crowd. But when you're doing this whole hand motion, you're queuing up the track with the first beat. When you release the track, the record, to play, the way you're going to do it is you're just going to let it go as your hand is moving forward. So don't push it, just basically release it as your hand is moving forward. Just lift up your hand from the record. So let me rewind it. Alright, now we're back. Like that. So just so you see again. Like that, okay? Now you don't have to lift up your hand like that necessarily, like so emphatically, but that's how you do it. So I'm saying that because sometimes people, when they start off, they're gonna try to push the record as they let go of it. You don't want to do that because you're gonna be offbeat right off the bat if you do that. So all you want to do is just time it so that as you're moving your hand forward is when you're going to be basically be hitting that beat, and that's when you want the beat to hit at the same time that the other track and its beat is going to hit, and you're just going to lift off your hand from the record as you're doing that. Okay, so you'll probably see this a couple more times as I'm beat matching here, but just letting you know. Okay. Then the other thing I want you to pay attention to is that there is something called phrasing in music. So if you're familiar with music, you kind of understand phrases and measures and bars and things like that. But if you don't really know a lot about that, basically what happens in music is that there's basically these segments in the music that kind of repeat and demarcate where stuff happens. Well, in electronic music, all the music is generally in a 4/4 time, which means that stuff is basically going to happen in counts of 4. So, for example, let me see if I can get to beginning of this track here. Okay, so I'm going to start counting off. When the first beat hits, like that one, when it hits, I'm going to start counting off in 4s, and what you'll notice is that on every first beat, not necessarily every first beat, but when I count out 1, sometime down the line, things will happen. So you'll just notice, and I'll probably do a little hand motion just so you notice it. Okay, and I'll start counting off. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there you go. And it just keeps happening like that. So what I want you to focus in on is when you beat match, try to cue up the track and let the first beat play on one of those 1s in the track. And it's something that you might have to do in your head a little bit and count out in your head a little bit just to kind of get a feel for it. But eventually with enough practice, you'll just kind of feel it and you'll be able to time your cues right on the right beat. And the reason why I bring this up is because beat matching gets a little bit easier if you do that, because all the instrumentation and things that are happening in the 2 tracks will be lined up better and in sync, and it's just going to help you with the beat matching. Okay, but let's go ahead and continue. So now let's say I have this track playing just like we just did with the queuing up, and both tracks are playing, and then the beats go off from each other because the BPMs, the tempos are a little bit different on them. What am I going to do? Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to correct that problem, that lack of synchronization between the 2 tracks. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to basically adjust this track temporarily. I'm going to adjust its speed so that I make it go a little bit slower, a little bit faster to try to get it back in sync with the other track. And the way I do that is basically in 2 ways. I'm going to slow down the track by either pressing down on the side of the platter, like here with my finger, like that. And I'm going to make the track go slower. So let me go ahead and play this. You can see this. Okay. So if you notice that, I slow down the track just like that, and then if I want to speed up the track, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my finger in the middle here of the record, move it with the label, without doing anything to it, just moving my finger on the label with the label at the same speed, and then if I want to speed it up, I'm just going to start moving my finger a little bit faster while maintaining contact with the record. Okay, so let me play it. So not doing anything right now, and then I'm going to speed it up. Okay, so it was a little jumpy, but you kind of get the idea. You try to do that so that it's just subtle enough, just to get things back in sync. But like I said, either you're going to speed up the track like that, or you're going to slow it down by pressing on the side of the platter here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this live. And basically the goal is I'm going to choose one of these things, whatever I think it is. If I think it's too slow, I'm going to speed it up, or if I think it's too fast, I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to pick one of those things and see if it works to try to get them back the 2 tracks back in sync. All right, so same deal here. Start from the first beat. Okay, find the first beat. There it is. Okay, I can hear him go off. Let me try something. I'm going to slow it down first. See, that sounds better. It's going to go off again though. Okay, so I already know right off the bat that this track is too fast, so I'm going to try to slow it down to get it back in sync. Alright, so now, what is the next thing that we do right after finding out that this track is too fast and then we have to slow it down? Because like I just showed you, you know, we did our beat matching here, and you know, we were doing our. Let me turn this down a tiny bit. Oh gosh, there we go. Okay, so I'm just going to do it one more time just so you see. I'm going to slow it down. Sounds better, right? So what are we going to do after this? Well, basically, any action that you do on the record here, so, you know, if I slow it down or if I were to do the opposite and speed up this track, any action that I do that I figure like, okay, I definitely know I have to slow down this track or I have to speed it up, then I have to basically mirror that same adjustment on the pitch fader right over here, okay? So for example, this track we know is too fast because I have to slow it down, right? So in order to adjust it so that that change that we just did stays permanent, because remember, if I slow it down right here, or if I speed it up right here, all that's going to do is it's just going to temporarily nudge the track to get back into sync, but it's still going to be at the previous BPM that it was at, which is the wrong BPM. So in order to make a permanent change in its speed, I'm going to move this pitch fader, this tempo slider, over in the right direction. So for this, in this case, I have to slow it down. So I'm just going to move it to the left here into the negative territory. Because remember, if it's in the center here, right where this center mark is, or the green line, if you see on this turntable right here, it's actually lit up green. On this one it's burned out, but this would normally be green. That means that it's at zero adjustment. But I want to slow down this track, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it over to the left a bit, so I slow down the track. So now hopefully when I do this whole process again of trying to sync up this track with the other one, it will take a longer period of time for it to go off beat from the other track. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and restart this track over here. And just do the same process. Find the first beat of the track. Okay. You can hear it go off though. So it's not quite there yet. So let's go ahead and slow it down again. It actually sounds worse right now, so it's possible that we're actually already at a too slow of a tempo. So let me go ahead and speed it up instead. Okay. Okay, sounds better. So let's move it to the right now. Okay. Still a little off, so adjust it again. Very gently. Move it just a tiny bit. And so, notice what's happening here. As I'm adjusting this track with my hands on the record itself, every time I make an adjustment. So, for example, right now what I was doing is I was speeding up the track instead. I went ahead and made an adjustment right here on the fader, just right after I did the adjustment here. So basically what's happening is as I'm beat matching, once I have this track playing with the other track, every time that I hear this track go off from the other track, I'm going to make an adjustment on the record, and then I'm going to mirror that adjustment on the pitch fader. So hopefully each time, if I slow it down, I'll move this one over. If I slow it down again, I have to move this fader over again. And basically I'm just kind of inching along on the fader to find the spot that I need to be at for this tempo of this track to match up with the other track. Okay, so let me show you what I mean again, but this time I'm just going to go ahead and just do it without saying anything, so you just can kind of watch me do it. And I'm actually going to go ahead and adjust this a little bit here, and do it over again. So same process. I'm going to reset this to 0. And actually, I'm going to go to this track. Okay. I'm just adjusting that track so that it's at a different BPM, so that we can show you a little bit of a different adjustment. Okay. 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 So I figured out that this is too fast, so I'm gonna slow it down. So I'm gonna move this fader over. Now, every time it goes off, I'm going to try to catch it and try to get it back into sync. Okay, sounds pretty decent. So now it's taking longer to go off sync. So it sounds pretty good right now. So now it's playing on beat. Both tracks are playing on beat with each other long enough, I think, that I'm going to go ahead and say it's pretty much beat matched, okay? So let me turn these down. So obviously this seems kind of quick when I'm doing it here, and it's it's because I've been doing this for a while, so I kind of have an idea of how to move everything and adjust. But basically, like I said, once you start playing this track and you have it on beat with the other one, and you start hearing the two beats go off from each other, you hear that ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk of two kick drums playing at different times, then you're going to go ahead and adjust the record, guessing whichever way you think it needs to be adjusted to get it back into sync. And so obviously, if you try going faster on the record, if you try nudging it so that it goes faster and it doesn't work, if it sounds worse, then try doing the opposite and see if that helps. And if that helps, then okay, there you go. Now you know that this track is too fast, and vice versa, And then every time after that, you have to make sure that you adjust this pitch fader to mirror the adjustment you're making. And then every time after that you hear the two beats go off from each other, make the adjustment on the record here to catch it, to get it back into sync, and then again make the adjustment on the slider here so that you are consistently making adjustments to the tempo right here on the record to get to that location where this needs to be so that the two BPMs are matched. Okay. Now I've had some questions about how much do I know? How much would I know to move this? And I would say my rule of thumb is to just kind of move it, maybe by one marker here at a time, in whichever direction you decide that it needs to be adjusted to. So, for example, on this record, what I did right off the bat is when I figured out that this track is too fast and I had to slow it down, I just moved it one notch over on the scale here, just right off the bat, to see if that was a good amount. And if this record is still too fast at that point, then all I do is next time I have to adjust it, I move it over another notch. Now, you'll come to a point where it takes longer for the two beats to go off from each other, and that's because at that point your tempo on this track that you're working on is going to be closer to this track than it was before, and so it's going to take a longer time to go off. Well, at that point, when you're making your adjustments on the pitch slider here are actually going to be smaller than before, because now you're already zoning in on that spot where you need to be for this tempo to be matched with the other track. So I might go up to when I get to 2% here, -2%, now it might take longer to go off. So the next time I do an adjustment, I might actually go only half a marker, or maybe even less, just a couple millimeters or a millimeter, and then see how it sounds. And once you get to the point where it's kind of off, but it's mostly on, then at that point, when you make adjustments on the record here, you're going to do very light adjustments, just a tiny little nudge here or there, and then you're going to make just a tiny little adjustment here or there on the pitch fader in the appropriate direction, because at that point, you're very close. You just have to make a tiny little adjustment for it to be perfectly on, okay? And basically remember that when you're beat matching, it's just a process of elimination. So you're just trying to pick a direction to see which way you have to go to make the BPM get closer to the other track. And then as you're going along, just try to eliminate areas where you know that the BPM is not going to be at. So for example, if I know that 2% is too fast, but -4% here is too slow, then it has to be somewhere in between, and so on and so forth. So you're basically just kind of bouncing around at that point, trying to zone in on that one spot where the tempo of your track that you're working on is going to perfectly match the other track. Okay, so a couple more things before we wrap up this video. A couple more things I want to mention. So another question that sometimes comes up is, for example, how do I know if this track is too slow or too fast in relation to the other track that's already playing? So in some situations, now with CDJs this is going to be easier if you work on CDJs later on, but with turntables, sometimes you'll know what the BPMs of the tracks are already. So for example, you might, some of these records actually have the BPM of the track already labeled on the record, or sometimes if you want, you can actually pre-calculate the BPM of the track just by listening to it and counting out how many beats happened within a minute or 10 seconds or whatever, and making the calculation. And so sometimes you can actually know ahead of time what the BPMs of the two tracks are. So for example, then if you know that, let's say, I don't know, let's say this one's 138 beats per minute and this is at 0% adjustment, well then you already know that this is going to be playing at 138. And then if you know that this one's 140, then you already know that, for example, this track is too fast when it's at 0% adjustment, and then you already know you're going to go into the negative territory on the tempo slider here, so you're going to move it up towards the negative or to the left here. So, those are some clues that you can use to sort of help you in deciding how to adjust this pitch fader here, and things like that. Well, otherwise, again, let me just talk about the overall process of the beat matching here. You're going to start up the track, find the first beat. You're going to listen to the two tracks as they're playing. Once you hear that ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk of sound of the two beats going off from each other, you're going to adjust the track by basically trying either speeding it up or slowing it down, and then once you figure out which one works, you're going to make that adjustment, get them back in sync, and then take that adjustment and make it on the pitch fader here. And then you're just going to come back, listen to the two tracks. If they go off from each other again, then you're again going to make the adjustment here on the record, either by slowing it down or speeding it up, and then make that adjustment on the pitch fader, and then wash, rinse, and repeat, basically. Just keep doing back and forth. Adjustments on the record, adjustments on the pitch fader every time you hear the two tracks go off from each other, and then hopefully once you go through the whole process of elimination that I talked about earlier on the pitch fader, and you get into that perfect spot on the pitch fader where the two tracks are basically staying in sync with each other for a good period of time, then you're beat matched, and that's all there is to it. Now, another question that I get sometimes, and I was going to mention this a little bit earlier, is the question is how well does it have to be beat matched? So, especially with the turntables, you'll notice this. It can be kind of hard sometimes to get in on that perfect spot where the BPMs are exactly the same on the two tracks, and so the question is, well, how long does it have to be beat matched? Like, how long do the two tracks have to stay in sync with each other to call it beat matched? And my answer to that is, it basically has to stay beat matched long enough to cover however long your transition is going to be. So for example, if my transition between this track over here to this track over here is going to span about 30 seconds, then my beat matching has to stick for 30 seconds. And that's it, pretty much. Probably a little bit more just to be safe. So you probably wanted to stay beat matched for probably at least 45 seconds to a minute. But really, to be honest, you only need to stay beat matched long enough so that as you're transitioning, things stay locked in and in sync throughout the whole transition. Now, there will be times when you may not get it perfectly beat matched, and so what will happen is as you're transitioning from one track to the other, it may go off a tiny bit as you're playing both tracks live. And in that situation, all you have to do is just very carefully adjust this track right here that you're transitioning to, and just nudge it just enough just to get it back into synchronization. So, you know, if it's going too fast, then I would just lightly tap on this track over here, and just to slow it down, just to get those beats back into sync with each other, and hopefully do it in such a way so that nobody notices that happening. So you may have to do that, and honestly, even professional DJs sometimes will have to do that, so don't worry if that happens to you. It's just a fact of life that sometimes you just can't get this perfectly beat matched. But as long as you're close enough and it stays pretty good throughout your transition, then you should be good to go. Okay? And then really the only last thing I want to talk about in terms of the process here is just to make sure that again, when you're doing the corrections on the turntable, on the record here, just be very gentle with them. You don't have to apply too much pressure on the platter, on the side of the platter here where the dots are. You don't have to, you know, really speed this record up a lot, because tiny little adjustments will often do just enough correction to make things work well. Okay, so let me just for the sake of clarity, let me just go over the whole process of beat matching one more time, start to finish, without me talking over it, just so you guys can see how this works, okay? So I'm just gonna wait for the beat on that to kick in. Maybe not perfect, but pretty good. And that is all there is to it. So basically at this point, all I'm going to say is hopefully this video has been helpful in sort of covering the basics of how beat matching works. And at this point, if you have any questions, if there's things that I didn't really go into enough detail about, or there are things that you have questions about, need more clarification on, feel free to ask the trainers in DVC that you guys will be working with to, you know, have things explained a little bit better. But hopefully, you know, this has been helpful and will kind of get you going. And at this point, all you really have to do to get good at this is just practice, practice, practice. This kind of stuff, it's a basic skill that's really important, and it's just going to make your life a lot easier if you get good at this. And the only way you can get good at this is by practicing a lot and trying it out, and just kind of getting your feet wet, so to speak. That's pretty much it. Thank you for watching this video. In the future videos, in the series that we're doing here for the basics in DJing, we're going to cover the mixer and then also talk about the CDJs, sort of the digital component, digital versions of the turntables. But those are going to be in the next videos. But again, thank you for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it was informative, and I hope to see you guys practicing a lot and getting really good at this, and seeing you guys at the big shows. So without much more, I'll leave it to you guys. So this is Arthur, and thanks for watching.